Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you, and today I'm here to talk about some of the difficulties that bands are facing while they are on tour. And I'm bringing this up because I've seen a lot of complaining on a lot of bands' social media pages and websites where people are complaining about the ticket prices going way up and the cost of merchandise going way up. And just complaining in general that bands don't come to a specific city, a specific venue, or specific country. Why do these bands not come here? And why are shows getting pushed back and canceled? Well, I'm here to get into all of that. But before I get into it, please hit the subscribe button and, of course, hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video if you like this video. And I'd love to hear your comments on what I talk about today. So, the difficulties. There are three main things that are causing a lot of issues for a lot of bands. And folks, I'm not talking about Iron Maiden. I'm not talking about Ozzy or AC/DC or Metallica or any of these bands that have like a ridiculous draw where they are going to get paid and have a great audience no matter what. I'm talking about the mid-level bands. I'm talking about even some of the upper mid-level bands if they're from Europe coming over to the States, or some of the smaller bands out there trying to make money on tour. And this doesn't really, this might apply a little bit to the bands where, they might play out for a week, they have a day job, and it's more of a hobby type thing for them. I'm talking about bands that go out and rely on making money by going on tour, selling merchandise, etc., etc. So, first thing is, very obvious thing is the cost. The cost of everything has gone up. The cost to rent a tour bus has gone up. The cost of fuel has gone up. Cost of food. The cost of hiring road crew has gone up. And on top of that, the venues, of course, because it's harder to find workers, have to pay the crew to run the venue more money. They have to pay more money for electricity and utility bills. And there are a lot of other factors that have gone up cost-wise, but I think a lot of you get the picture. Oh, and if you're going to sell merchandise, the cost and the weight for that merchandise has skyrocketed. So this is something that is very, very difficult for these bands to adapt to. And the smaller you are as a band, the less of a draw that you have, the harder it becomes to go on tour and to get promoters to put up money to bring you there. And this is a big reason why bands may be reluctant, or promoters may be reluctant to, bring certain bands in because they want a guaranteed draw, which I'll get into here in a second. But the cost of everything has gone way up dramatically, and it has caused a lot of problems for a lot of bands. And of course, when people complain the ticket prices go up, well, when the cost of everything to put the show on goes up, the ticket prices are going to go up. I know logically for most people you understand that, but there are some people that for whatever reason can't seem to comprehend that fact. Now I'm going to get into the second thing, which I think is probably the biggest bottleneck and the biggest issue that's happening. Because it's bad enough that the cost of everything is going up. But remember, most bands had a lot of time off, back for almost 2 years. It was like every show was getting canceled or pushed back due to some kind of COVID regulation or some kind of BS or whatever was happening. Musicians seemed to be like the only people out of work when everybody went back to work, right? So now all of these bands are trying to tour. Now, they're all trying to tour, and they're trying to tour at the same time. And in some cases, you have all these different cities. Sometimes you get 5, 6, 7 heavy metal bands in a week. Sometimes you might get a couple, 2 or 3 in the same night. So it's caused a lot of problems. So first thing is this. What it has caused is problems with pre-sale tickets. And what I mean by that is, bands obviously rely on a pre-sale. Promoters, they typically expect a pre-sale to happen once they announce a show. Now, bands are booking these shows well in advance, hopefully to be able to get into that market, and hopefully there are no other bands playing there. And what is happening is some of these pre-sales have been very low to where the shows are getting pushed back because promoters and bands are realizing that other heavy metal bands who are competing for the same audience are also trying to play in that city at the same time, either in the same week, either in the same night, and it doesn't really do them any good if they don't have a big pre-sale, and that's caused a lot of problems. On top of that, you got to look at it from the fans' point of view. if you only have an X amount of money to spend, maybe you have enough to go see a band once, one band a week or two bands in a week, right? Let's just, for example, and 5 bands are coming out in that city in a week. What ends up happening is then typically most people will decide, okay, I'll go see this band. And instead of prepaying for it because they are not sure what band they're going to see, what they are going to do is they are going to go at the last minute, go up to the venue and buy their ticket and basically be part of the walk-up. Well, this causes an issue because promoters are going to wonder, okay, am I going to lose my ass on this show? What's going to happen? There is no big pre-sale here. Let's say they're expecting 500 tickets. Let's say each show is expecting 500 tickets to be sold prior to the show coming through. And let's say they got 50. Let's say they got 100. Are you going to get the big walk-up? Sometimes you will. Sometimes you will not. It all depends on what side, what people decide to do. And that is a problem. That is causing people and bands to push shows back. It has caused a lot of problems with that. And honestly, this is a big obstacle for a lot of groups right now. If you're a band from Europe, a power metal band, power metal sadly is not, power metal from Europe has never really been that big here in the States. Unfortunately, you may be competing with 3 or 4 other bands that have the same draw you do, sometimes even on the same night in one city. Now, it doesn't happen often, but it can, or in the same week. And this person who has a limited budget has to make that decision. So there is a very good possibility you might lose a lot of money by coming here. So that's just one of many examples I could give as to how much of a problem this has been. And last but not least, before I get into this, are the shortages. So I talked a little bit about the cost of everything going up and bands all trying to tour at the same time. So what is happening is when bands all try to tour at the same time, guess what? Most of the time they're trying to access the same resources. Well, guess what, folks? We have a shortage of vehicles, which means a shortage of tour buses. And if bands are trying to all tour at the same time, and they all try to get all these tour buses at the same time, which is something that normally doesn't happen, guess what? You aren't going to have any buses. It's going to be hard to find one, and therefore you may have to pay more for one. On top of that, the factories that produce vinyl, t-shirts, and CDs, all of these factories are booked to capacity. So if you ever wonder why bands are putting out pre-orders, 10 months in advance as opposed to 3 or 4, it's because these factories, they don't they're like over capacity. The demand exceeds the capacity to be able to produce the product. And as a result of that, bands now have to wait longer to get merchandise made. And that merchandise, of course, has skyrocketed in price compared to what it once was. And part of the reason is that these companies, they can charge that because the demand far exceeds the supply out there right now. So these are some of the things that bands are facing, and it makes it very difficult to plan a tour. It makes it very difficult to finance a tour. And if you want a great example of something that happened recently, Anthrax had to cancel a European leg of their tour. They did the UK dates, but the rest of the European tour they canceled because even though they had the shows booked, and all that stuff, they showed up there and realized that their costs would be triple than what they anticipated, which means that they probably wouldn't be making much, if any, money by going over there, hence why they canceled that leg of the tour. So this is why you have so many pushbacks. This is why you have so many cancellations. This is why the ticket prices and merchandise have gone up. And the sad fact is, folks, this is a reality that we have to face. And it's unfortunate that the artists suffer. It's like, 1% of the music business always seems like 1% is making music and 99% of it is business. But unfortunately, this is the world that we live in. So have some sympathy, folks. Some of these bands that are really struggling to get their music out there, when you go on their pages and you start ranting and raving about the ticket prices going up, I get Ticketmaster fees. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the price of seeing a band has gone up, or a meet and greet has gone up, or whatever. Or you're complaining they don't come to a certain city. Well, guess what? This is why. It may not be financially viable for them. Maybe nobody wants to put up money for them to come into that city. People they all want to tour, but nobody wants to lose their ass as far as how much money they have to spend on tour. You know, if you're going on tour to make money, guess what? If you're not going to make any, you're going to lose your ass. You aren't going to go. It's just that simple. So with that said, folks, have some sympathy for the artists out there. They really are trying. They really are struggling. And I think artists and creatives and musicians in general have suffered greatly as far as this whole pandemic thing and how the effect that it has had, because the after effects are still going on. And unfortunately, this is the reality that we are in. So with that said, folks, thanks for watching. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.